I wake up in the coldest of sweats, which is a commendable feat because it really don't get colder than 60 degrees in the Bahamas. This was the most traumatic nightmare that I have ever experienced, and the reason for it being so vividly terrifying is because it actually happened in real life. Why don't repressed memories stay repressed? I had things to do in the morning, but now because of this nightmare, I up at 3 o'clock in the morning watching Samurai Jack, trying to supplant the PTSD given to me from this nightmare with Aku, which is probably what gave me the nightmare in the first place. Another week, another prostration of my trials and tribulations. But most importantly, another week of trying to find a way to incorporate a trigger warning that doesn't spoil the story. Let's just say that this story contains a symbol that signifies hate. But I won't be showing this symbol at all throughout this entire video, because demonetization. However, I will be revealing the way how it relates to one of the most mortifying experience of my 26 years. But before that, let me big you up my big man them, big woman them, and big non-binary folk them, cause y'all was carrying on bad last week, I swear. Y'all was carrying on like y'all was in carnival chipping in the road last week. The comments and likes them were far above the average, because you are far from the average. I tried to reply to as many comments as I can, but alas, it is becoming a very onerous task. So, if you really want to foster a deeper relationship, then slide over to the Patreon, which this video is brought to you in part by exclusive bonus videos, exclusive tracks from yours truly, Discord, playlist. Man, listen, the perks them can't done, and I'd love to have you over there, sir. Now back to this pool of sweat that I was submerged in after waking up from this hellscape of a nightmare. Despite trying to go back to sleep, all I could think about was how this actually happened in real life years ago. I was running away from the gal them like I was Chip Skylark. Not because they wanted me, of course, but because they wanted to hold me down and play tic-tac-toe on my ashy ankles. It was just another Tuesday, until something that normally doesn't happen, happened. A gal came to my side, and I was thinking that she was gonna hold me down so the rest of the gals them could descend upon my ankles like locusts. She reached into her book bag, and I was looking at her with horror, thinking about what she was about to pull out. Mary Poppins, listen man, whatever you got in your bag, you need to leave it in there. But I closed my eyes in submission to my fate. And then I began to feel this warm and wet sensation on my leg. Get your mind out the gutter, it ain't what you think. I look down, and she has a bottle of Jergens out, and she's lotioning my ankles. This girl that I had never spoken to a day in my life wasted her nice eucalyptus Jergens lotion on my ashy ankles that looked like I had stepped knee-deep in Frosty the Snowman. She asked me my name, and I told her it's Peter, yeah. And I asked her name in return, and her name was Kajol. Thus began my platonic friendship with Kajol. We were both awkward and alienated from the popular crowd. Amidst everyone hooking up and being pressured into serious relationships in their teens, it was a unique friendship between a boy and a girl from different backgrounds. She was Punjabi and I am Bahamian. She hadn't even been in the country for very long, so I gave her, I put her onto some Bahamian things, and she put me onto some Bollywood things and Bollywood songs that I still love to this very day. Chara bishaw balama, Chundalia chara bishaw balama. But there was something in particular about her culture that would change our friendship dramatically, and it would never be the same again. We were in music class and not paying attention per usual, and she was doodling in a notebook and I was writing lyrics. Then the bell rang and we were beginning to pack our bags. And then something caught my eye that was incredibly offensive, and my mouth, and I couldn't even sublimate my expression. She didn't know I saw it at that point, but what she drew, I would never forget. So as we were walking out of class, she asked me if I wanted to grab lunch. And I said no, I had something else to do. But I could tell that she could tell that something had changed. The following days, I would avoid this gal like the plague. I mean, she would message me on Skype and I would leave up on red. All because of this thing that she drew, which I thought the world knew was incredibly offensive. Every time I saw her, I felt betrayed, because I took her to be a friend of mine. Till the day where she finally cornered me. She asked if she did or said something to make me act this way towards her. And I told her that I know what she is, so please don't insult me by trying to pretend to be something that you're not. She was like, I told you I'm Punjabi. And I give this gal the stinkest look I could have given her. I told her that I saw her drawing and I don't want to be friends with someone that believes in such hateful things. Wait, I'm confused. What drawings are you talking about? At this point, I was so irritated that I pretty much just blurted it out. I didn't even parse my words, I just blurted it out. I came out and said it. I said, Kajol, you're a Nazi. I saw the swastika in your book, which you was drawing in class. So don't come around me no more. And by the way, the Führer wouldn't even like you anyway because you ain't blonde or blue-eyed. I might as well tell you. And for a second, silence dampened our ambience. Have you ever heard silence before? Like sounds that used to make sounds, ceasing to make sounds anymore? Everything just faded into silence and it absorbed the entirety of the audio spectrum. I could literally hear her facial expression until she just burst out into raucous laughter and I was disgusted. She said that she was Jane and I said, no, Kajol, you're a Nazi. No, I practice Jainism. It's a religion and the symbol that you're talking about doesn't mean what you think it means. It actually means well-being, like I wish you well. My eye was twitching. Let me tell you, my eye was literally twitching, but not from confusion. From anger. I was insulted by the fact that she thought that she could fool me into thinking that this was anything but a symbol of hate. Till she dragged me into the computer lab so that we could go on the internet. You know, back in the day, we didn't have internet on our phones. I had a Motorola Razr. Some of y'all ain't know about that. And she showed me that this symbol actually did mean something totally different to her. She told me of how this symbol was hijacked by hate. But before that, it was a symbol of positivity and peace. And let me tell you something. My belly was twist right up in knots. I ain't gonna lie. Like I downed a whole bottle of Pepto and my body was just all from the embarrassment that I felt from assuming something about someone else's culture. The opprobrium I felt from telling someone about their own culture. But most of all, the immense sadness that I felt from risking and ultimately losing a friendship over something that was essentially just ignorance. Things would never be the same between Kajol and I. You know, we would try, but it just wasn't. After you crossed that Rubicon, it was very difficult to come back from that. So she would see me around school, but the friendship that was forged in the ash of my ankles had faded away like the ash did when she lotioned them. That was the worst analogy that I ever made. Anyway, this is one of the real dangers of cultural appropriation. When a majority culture takes a remnant from a minority one and distorts it until people associate that symbol or that remnant from that minority culture with the story and the narrative and the associations that the majority one gave it. Before you know it, the original narrative and meaning behind the symbols or whatever cultural remnant or vestige it is gone. Poof. In this postmodern poof. This is one of the lesser known issues with cultural appropriation, a term in itself that the right has co-opted and basically used it to lessen its meaning and its severity. So anytime when someone else outside of a culture does something about a minority culture, they just cry about cultural appropriation and they basically parade it until it has no meaning in itself. And there's a fine line between cultural appropriation and appreciation, and it should be treated with nuance because cultural appropriation, honestly, in my opinion, is a neutral thing. It's not inherently bad. It's actually inherently natural. A good artist borrows, but a great artist steals. And I advocate for that exact adage when it comes to how people can evolve culture by stealing from it. However, there are some caveats when it comes to this theft. And as a matter of a case study, we'll be looking at a medley of different artists in what I like to call the Jamaican industrial complex. This capitalist conveyor belt that has blessed us with so many derivatives of Jamaican music. And the first stop on this assembly line is none other than Snow. Informant, yeah, I lick your bum bum down. I swear, I ain't gonna lie, it is hurt every time when I sing that. And that's the first time I've sung that. And probably gonna be the last time I've sung that. Snow crawled! So acts like Drake could... I don't know what the hell Drake is do. And there are more parallels between these two than meets the eye. Darren Kenneth O'Brien, otherwise known as Daddy Snow, which he called himself on his own website, but he's known as Snow, is also a Toronto native like Drake. Growing up in a diverse and eclectic neighborhood, he began toasting at an early age. Toasting being one of the earliest forms of rapping. and it came from Jamaica with greats like Uroy. I chat about that at length in this video up here. But in short, O'Brien basically has this interesting amalgamation of reggae, rap, rock, and other forms of popular music. So he blended all of these things together and began to make music. And it was until DJ Marvin Prince found Snow that Snow had his big break into the music industry. It resulted in Snow meeting none other than MC Shan, a New York rap legend. And they together, in concert with MC Shan, Snow, and Marvin Prince, basically writing Informer, his greatest and biggest single, one of the biggest singles ever in reggae's history. And you know, I see both sides like Chanel. I'm a big fan of the grey, I'm a big fan of nuance, and I'm gonna talk about the good of Snow initially, you know, before I get into the abundance of bad things about Snow. And my issue here is not with Snow, you know, I don't necessarily have a problem with Snow. I'd say that the problem that I have with Snow is pretty much the same problem that I have with people like Eminem. Snow stands for the natural progression and evolution of culture. He is the epitome of what happens when you have a litany and myriad of intermingling cultures in a diverse neighborhood. Snow symbolizes the best of what can come from differing perspectives that result in a product informed of a panorama of cultures. I bear no qualms with Snow. It's the system around Snow that I have all the smoke for. Now, Snow suffers from that down white boy stereotype that FD talks about his video on how to be an ally, where in order to compensate for the obvious difference between him and the people around him, he overshoots and basically forgets his footing by subscribing to black stereotypes in order to supplement his deficiency in darkness. Snow is literally the epitome of that, given that he actually spent time in jail for an attempted murder charge. Which brings me into the issue of the existence of Snow. Let's start with the fact that he surmounted this murder charge and was able to avoid the stigmas associated with attempted murder. While being inside, MC Shan and the rest of them were actually promoting his single, so they was making him money while he was inside. So Snow came out with the fanfare and laudations of a chart-topping single right after he was just locked up for trying to murder someone. In fact, the album, 12 Inches of Snow or something like that, it sold 8 million units worldwide. Informer was at the top of the billboards for 7 consecutive weeks. It was recorded twice in the Guinness Book of World Records as the best-selling reggae single in US history, as well as the highest charting reggae single in history. Once being in the system, it's damn near impossible to extricate themselves from the system. But not only did Snow surmount this charge, he leveraged it into becoming one of the most successful reggae acts in history. Which brings me to the issue with his success. I railed many of the accolades associated with Informer. And music is of course objective, but the song, while being catchy, admittedly catchy, is the musical equivalent of cafeteria jerk chicken in a gentrified neighborhood in Brooklyn. If this is the cream that rises to the top, what the hell is the rest of the drink comprised of? Even reggae legends like Inni Camus, Diana King, and Shabba Ranks have come out claiming that Informer is yet another example of watered down commercial reggae that rose to international popularity in the 1990s. In hindsight, it comes off as a garish parody of the authentic struggle that Jamaican artists convey in their portrayal of dancehall. And to drive that point home is none other than Jim Carrey.
Imposter, I'm just a middle class working from Toronto. In spite of how I sound, single one platinum bigger than Marley and Jimmy and Yellowman, but I'm not even mulatto. My reggae's watered down.
One man may say that it's the merit of the music that makes the music rise to the top, but I beg to differ. While Snow's gentrification of hip-hop and reggae definitely makes it more accessible to a general audience, it was his continence that made him relatable to the white populace of people that were actually fans of this music. The very white people that wanted to be down with reggae culture but probably couldn't relate to the socio-political issues that were being talked about, or the very skin barrier that would provide some problems for them. The industry itself is more primed for the success of a white artist in a predominantly black art form than black artists themselves. See the multitude of black dancehall artists that have never and will never see the American charts, let alone get a chart-topping single like Snow did. But most of all, it all breaks down when it comes to the money. Remember Marvin Prince? You know, the Jamaican DJ that literally found Snow? He was touring with Snow as his DJ in the 90s. And then suddenly he vanished. Come to find out that Prince actually left the tour due to the court documents revealing that there was a difference in the pay distribution. Snow was receiving far more money from the management than Prince was. Plus, despite Prince actually writing about 5 songs on Snow's debut album, he's only credited for writing Runway. And when Prince was given a multi-album production and recording agreement for both him and Snow, Prince sought out legal advice from a friend and never saw the agreement again. There was an oral agreement between Prince and Snow, and they basically said that they would split the profits 50-50. This was first established in the early 90s when Prince and Snow was making music in the humble beginnings of Prince's basement. Prince claims that he said that if anything ever comes out of this, let's be partners. However, Snow said that he would only refer to Prince as his partners in promotional videos, and that the term partners was only a term used in slang. Prince was the very fella that helped write Informer with Snow while Snow was being locked up in Maplehurst Correctional Complex. Man, you know, it wasn't smart on Prince's behalf to get into a business relationship with Snow in the first place without any type of legal documentation. But this perfectly exemplifies a reoccurring theme when it comes to Jamaican artists. Snow didn't only need Prince for his expertise in dancehall and rap and reggae, but he initially needed him to give him an endorsement in order to authorize Snow's credibility in the genre. It's a method employed by many businesses that are trying to gain momentum with a particular minority audience. And when it all falls down, as it inevitably does, guess who's left holding the bill? The minority. Snow may very well not be the first Jamaican artist to do this, and he definitely will not be the last, because he would give rise to the most unconventional reggae acts that the world had ever laid eyes on. MTV Jams was what MTV sought out to be in the first place. I can vividly recall waking up early at 6 o'clock in the morning to Panic at the Disco. I chimed in like, haven't you people ever heard of closing the goddamn door, no? And oh, Brendan Urie, you have no idea how versatile and true those words ring today. Cause we should have definitely closed the proverbial door on Caribbean culture after Snow. But it's like Snow bust the whole front of the barn open, wide open, bust it wide open, laying the groundwork for this guy. No, I ain't playing none of his songs cause he looked like the type of fella the copyright strike fellas like me. Matthew Paul Pinder, or otherwise known as Matashahu. I'm positive I'm gonna butcher that name, you know, but he butchering reggae, so I gotta butcher his name. He is one of the world's greatest oddities in music, let alone reggae itself. A Reconstructionist Jew living in New York that ended up rebelling against his rigid upbringing by dropping out of school and taking up drugs. And his main act of revolt is becoming a rapper. No, it's definitely not lost on me that the New York hip-hop scene is intrinsically rooted in Jamaican culture. His breakout song, King Without a Crown, was a fast-paced rap reggae oddity that dominated the airwaves. Think CJ the X rapping, but with reggae sensibilities. It was well received by reggae and rock outfits alike. Billboard actually named him the top reggae artist, as well as a litany of other accolades and acknowledgements. His scatting style is very reminiscent of dancehall legends and early pioneers like Barrington Levy and Ika Mouse, you know, that biddy bang bang, biddy bang bang, biddy bang bang, bang. Now it's also worth mentioning that the Rastafarian roots of reggae borrows a lot from Judaism. So a Jewish reggae artist isn't extremely odd when you think about it. It's actually a cyclical motion. Whereas Snow may have been connected to reggae via a class struggle, he had Matashahu that was connected to reggae by faith. But the mere fact that he is able to lap the multitude of Jamaican artists that will never see the success of King Without a Crown reveals the industry's penchant to promote and propel a particular disposition over another. Sure, you could cite the accent barriers or racial barriers as to why Jamaican artists on average don't break into the popular music scene. But what is more alienating than a Jewish man from New York rapping about Judaism in a reggae cadence? Maybe the infamous Germaican, not Jamaican, but Germaican, like Germany, Macon? The Germaican that got many accolades from Jamaican artists and all kind of outlets themselves. Listen, I know you waiting on me to go and dig my teeth into Drake, but guess what? You need a palate cleanser before I take on Drake. It'd be very apparent by now that cultural appropriation is a very neutral and nuanced phenomena in nature. These artists aren't voracious malefactors that are bent on monetizing marginalized minorities, or at least, you know, the majority I hope aren't. But the capitalist corporations that propel these people into the limelight and perpetuate systemic disadvantages to the people themselves that actually created the culture in the first place. That is who we're talking about today. Tillman Otto was born in Cologne, Germany, with no obvious ties to Jamaica until he was 18, when he would travel quite frequently to the Caribbean country. Bent on becoming a reggae artist, he marinated himself in Jamaican culture. And in 2002, he finally broke out with his single Journey to Jah. I need to stress that Caribbean people, myself included, used to jam Gentleman. Them gone so far away. I remember being a little arshy youth listening to him and Collie Buds. Another white passing reggae artist. I actually think he was from Bermuda by way of New Orleans. But another one, he had a bag of tunes. This boy was bad. The way you move it, not gonna get you nowhere. Yeah. Tomorrow's another day, yeah, tomorrow's another day, yeah. The nostalgia, Jesus, the nostalgia, the muscle memory. You know, this is what it was to grow up as a Bahamian picnic, you know, listening to Jamaican tunes. And that's coming from a Caribbean person. Imagine the outsiders that are listening to Gentleman and Collie Buds. So what I'm trying to articulate is that there are issues that are endemic to Caribbean society that people like Gentleman and Collie Buds that are tourists in these societies pretty much articulating as if they were their own. And I'm not saying that there's a problem with people outside of a culture to deliberate on issues that they see with a culture, but tread lightly. The prevalence of white, European, and American acts finding prominence in reggae and dancehall shows that this is not a fluke. Snow was not a fluke. There was a demand for watered down reggae made by people that look like the people that the art was targeting. Gentleman had the luxury of leaving Germany, traveling away from Germany, and coming to JA to be received handsomely into the culture with wide open arms and full embrace. So much so that greats like Kamani Marley and Barrington Levy and Beanie Man himself, the king of dancehall, would collab with fellas like Gentleman, which highlights how Caribbean people, in our concerted efforts to be welcoming to outsiders, a trait engendered by our tourism and hospitality industry, has ultimately resulted in foreign commodification of our culture. We be so wet up to just see a white person dance to our music or sing our songs or just acknowledge our existence in general, which contributes to their success, which will eclipse that of many of our own artists. In fact, I'll take it a bit farther to say that familiarity breeds the contempt, because we often shun our own or even hold them to a higher standard just because they're one of ours. A common adage in the Bahamas is that you have to make it over foreign before you actually make it home, which in other words means that if you don't get approval in a foreign market, you will not get that approval home. It's very giving self-loathing and crab in the bucket syndrome. You know, as soon as you try to advance, it's your own people that is drag you back down. But we're very quickly to lift those outside of our culture, setting the bar very low for success so long as you're foreign. It's much like those who are trying to start up a business and you know you on IG trying to promote your business and you want your friends to promote your business for you or like or engage with your content, but they ain't gonna do that. However, they got all kind of energy to hype up people that they have no clue or familiarity or any type of ties to over you. Which leads me to another Toronto native that I'm pretty sure that most of us are far, unfortunately, inured to. Now there's a litany of low-hanging fruit to bite on when it comes to Champagne Papi, to his well-documented affection for young ladies. You know, he likes the young ladies. To his precipitous decline in musical quality ever since he lost his ghostwriter somewhere along, you know, the if you're reading this is probably too late era. But today we just focusing on Drake's Jamaican phase. Now just like New York, London, and other diverse epicenters, Toronto has a very large influx of Caribbean immigrants, which Drake is cited as the matrix for his patois. In fact, he goes as far to say that it's not even patois, but it's just Six slang. You know, Six referring to Toronto. You know, that's just the way that they talk underneath the maple leaves them. And that could be very true. You know, that could definitely be very true. The evolution of culture and language creates neologisms that Drake is talking about. So I won't knock him on that, you know. But Aubrey, please don't take me for no yam head, okay? Please don't take me for no bald head step Grammy, because we know that ain't what you're doing, Aubrey. The reason why Drake has been successful as he has been is not because he only capitalizes on the work of others. Whether it be The Weeknd writing the majority of songs on Take Care, or Quentin Miller writing the majority of If You're Reading This Is Probably Too Late. Drake liked to tap into the burgeoning trends and movements in the hip-hop underground and use that to extend his 15 minutes of fame into over a decade. This boy should have been done from time. Drake came onto the scene trying to be, this boy wanted to be a Houston rapper so bad. Lord, this man wanted to be Pimp C. If you listen to So Far Gone and Comeback Season, it is apparent that this man wants to be a Houston down south rapper. So he kept this going in his debut. And then he switched things up a little bit into the more introspective crooning styles that The Weeknd is known for in his early trilogy works. He basically carried that. I remember even reading the interview where The Weeknd said that, man, The Weeknd was so hungry. So he just gave Drake all of his demos. I'm pretty sure the Practice was a Weeknd demo. Then Nothing Was the Same was the single that nothing will ever be the same when it come to Aubrey Drake Graham. Cause he would then go on to bastardize dancehall and Afro beats in one album in 2016. Oh my lord, I swear when this thing came out, I couldn't escape it. It was in every bar, every gym, every Uber, One Dance, Controller, some of the most rinsed tunes in dancehall history, some of the most gentrified dancehall came from Views from Drake. And it coincided with the apogee of what we know to be tropical house. Just saying the name makes me foam at the mouth. Tropical house with, giants like Bieber basically say that they make him tropical house that, is influenced by a world sound, which really just means dancehall and dancehall rhythms and reggaeton. But my biggest gripe with Drake is how he uses up a particular sound. He just used up Caribbean culture and everything around it, and then just throws it away when he's done with it. When it's no longer serving them, he just throws it away. He would feature on Rihanna's work. He was on Riri's work, right? Remember work. Oh God, that was awful too. And then, he would even have a public relationship with Rihanna. All of this to authorize his Caribbean card. You know what I'm saying? Of course, there's a lot more benefits from dating one of the most apparent pop stars in pop history, bar none. But it's all to authorate his authentic image in Caribbean culture. All of that. He milked the dancehall demeanor with fellas like DJ Khaled. All of them was just basically just milking the cow with dancehall until he promptly switched over to UK drill. He featured Gigs, which is the UK equivalent of 50 Cent, on his, mixtape. I don't know what the hell that was. More Life. This was only a year after Views. The Caribbean sensibility is something that he said was just in him, as a part of the six. It was all gone after but a year. So let's be clear, the application of Caribbean culture on behalf of Drake is totally cap for capitalists. More sinister, however, more vexing, more pernicious is how he handled Jamaican artists. Sean Paul actually saw this coming from time, Sean Paul was one of the first people to criticize Drake on being a culture vulture. And then Drake drew the ire of Mavado, who actually ended up releasing a song called Enemy Lines. And then Drake would return fire to Mavado on a featured freestyle that he had with Heady One called Only You. And understand that there's a reason why they call Heady One Heady One. Look at his head. Then there's of course one of the worst ones, which is how he treated Popcorn when it came to Controller. He just basically took him off the whole song together. All together, he just took him off the track. Or when he used Beanie Man as an introduction for one of his tunes and had Beanie Man just hyping him up like he a headliner. Beanie Man, the king of dance hall, he topped him so that he could introduce Drake on a dance hall tune? And this method of incorporating a Jamaican skit between a song or before a song, that's a method that they use all in order to contribute and adduce evidence towards this credibility and authenticity. And the problem with this is, to the uninitiated eye, this comes off as authentic. Therefore, it would make Drake an ambassador of the culture. Moreover, it actually begins to supersede the culture itself. So people feel as though that they're getting a unique and authentic cultural experience from Drake, and that is the culture, rather than the culture itself. Much like the trans community would lament over Dave Chappelle's very basal and bastardized understanding of their plight, and making a parody of it that will reach the eyes and ears of the general public before their actual plight even does, thus becoming a reference point for trans issues and trans rights for a lot of people, rather than trans people themselves actually being able to tell their damn story. Big names like Drake using Jamaican face in order to increase and augment their pockets is just as repugnant as Cool Runnings and Luke Cage posing to be an authority on a culture that you are a tourist in. It's the same vibe I get from certain people that come on a Caribbean cruise ship, right? Then they badmouth the country when they go back to their home country like they know the ins and outs of the culture, when really they only came off the boat for about a couple seconds, walking a tourist trapeze, and then going back on the boat. That is not the experience of that country. That country is not your playground. That country is a thriving culture with people, families, a whole working government, everything. How do they think that they literally have the authority to criticize a culture that they barely understand? These are the nuanced problems with cultural appropriation. The fact that it can erase or distort a culture beyond recognition to the point where the original culture, much like that original Indian symbol, is forgotten, as it is eclipsed by something that resembles it only in face but has a totally different meaning. And you can see how these biases manifest itself in a myriad of different ways that I'm listing right over there. Click that if you want to understand some more of the tangible dangers of cultural appropriation. I can see it there.